and we actually didn't have a chance to discuss it and have a motion on it. So I thought that was premature to have it in the minute without proper board consent.
I thought there was a motion. Let's see. I thought there was a motion for that, wasn't there?
Yeah, but it's not showing up at all. Because that's what you told me by email, that there was a motion.
I thought that there was. Yeah, okay. You're right. It's not in the minutes.
No. And this is why Jess sends these out a couple of weeks early for all board members to review, to catch these things. So
yeah, sorry. I mean, I had some discussion. I had some corrections, what I thought to these minutes, but I did not catch that. I actually, when Bertrand brought that up, I went back and listened to the video, and there was in fact a motion.
Okay. Right. I'll get Jess to listen to those.
And I believe it was 3-1-1, Standish saying no and Bertrand abstaining, I think.
I think I abstained.
That's what I recall too. I was not sure if it was
the other way around. Yeah, I think, Standish abstained and Bertrand.
So it's clearly not in the minute. And I think instead we have this long language on how the district is going to handle the retrofit of the existing meters. And I think that should be also discussed by the board instead of being just incorporated by the minute.
So we'll talk about that one, probably under general manager's report, and then decide what we want to do.
Okay.
Further, I know you've got some concerns about that, Bertrand.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Okay, but in any case, the minutes do need to be corrected to show that motion.
I'll have Jess do that and recirculate again. Please read your emails from Jess and get her comments.
Okay. Okay, so now can we have a vote on these minutes as they will be corrected? Or do you want to bring these minutes back next time to see that the motion is properly put in?
We can bring them back next time with the motion in it.
Okay, we'll bring it back next time for approval, consideration and approval. Okay, let's move on to item 8, items for board action. Item 8A, finances. Kelly, hi. And
morning.
Go ahead and just do 1 through 4 under A.
Sure. So starting on page 29 of your packet, we have the balance sheet. There wasn't really anything to report. You can see that total operating cash is up from plan by $163,000.
Can I request one thing? Eric, could you make it one step bigger so we can see the number? Thank you very much. Yeah.
So unless there are any other questions in regard to the balance sheet, I'll move on. Okay, moving on to the revenue account by fund. You'll see snow removal is negative, but again, once we start to receive, once we started receiving payments for snow removal contracts, that'll change. And also water is negative, and G&A and fire and parks, well, they're always negative until the end of the year. So
I actually have a question on snow removal.
Sure.
Budget. Is there I'm not sure that's the right word, reconciliation or checking of actual money collected by the district for driveways, snow removal, compared to the spreadsheet that is shared with the board through the board packet? Because for several years, I did find discrepancies, and I'm concerned with that. So I'd like to see, to make sure that we actually collect, actually the board see what's going to be collected, or vice versa. I don't know which order we want to do that. But as I said, for the last 3 years, I'm aware of discrepancies through some neighbors and what they tell me they actually pay versus what is on the spreadsheet. So I'm concerned with that. I'd like to have someone to look into that.
Sure. We invoice all of our driveway contracts that have signed. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I can pull our
I'd
AR
like
report.
An easy way to do the checksum is basically if you take all your collected, everything you collect on the snow removal driveway, compare that number to what we say we would be collecting in the last 3 years. And if you do that and it's the same, then I withdraw my request, but I'm pretty sure you're going to find a different number. Then you need to start digging in to find out why and how.
Sure.
Yeah, I wonder if
That
that's an
sounds like a lot
appropriate
of work.
request.
Yeah, that's a lot. Actually, so let me
For 3
say
years.
a couple things. In the past, the reason it's varied is because certain people, we included them assuming they were going to sign and they didn't. Bertrand, you're one of them.
Okay.
And some people started midway through the season, so they weren't a customer in the original spreadsheet. So that would also account for a variance. I don't want to spend any more staff time looking at these. I mean, if you want to come look at the invoices we send to the customers, we can do that, but that's the easiest thing for Kelly to do. We have enough work not creating new stuff
Well,
unless the board wants it.
But may I ask a question though? I assume that in some way there's, I don't know what the right word would be, an account for each contract or something that tracks each contract. I mean, it's one of the difficulties of having so many contracts, but do we do that? I mean, is there a spreadsheet or something that says driveway contract XYZ?
Yes, there's a database. There's a database, and we record the date when the money's received.
And the invoices are generated out of report server, which is where the numbers came from for the spreadsheet. So it's all
The invoices are actually generated in PCS.
but they pull from.
So that's cool. So let's make it simple for staff. In this case, can you send me that information and I will do the check between what was collected and invoiced versus what was in the board packet. That's easy for me to do. I can write a quick script and it's not going to take a lot of time.
Is it possible to send that report, Kelly, Eric, Bob?
I can send it. I can take care of that.
Okay.
I think you wanted the invoices, so it's through PCS, Bob, not report server. So we'd have to send him the PCS stuff if that's what he's asking for, the invoices.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a matter of just generating a report, is that what it is?
It's not a problem. I can generate a report.
Great. Let's do that then. Thank you. That would be great. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions on the accounts here? Kelly, you're welcome to move on.
Moving on to the combined income statement for August on page 32 of your packet. You can see August revenues were up from plan by about $2,500. Year to date, we are down from plan by $14,000. Considering the commercial revenue being so far under plan, the residential revenue being so far over plan, I'm considering that a win at this point. And mainly the reason why we are down from plan is due to that base rate calculation error that's noted in the budget variances.
Oh, right.
Kelly, just an overview question. Are these final numbers, or are we still waiting for the audit to be completed?
These are final numbers for August. The audit, I mean, we are, I'm getting the final draft or the draft of the financial statements from the audit, but there's not going to be any changes to June. These are definitely final numbers for August.
Okay.
Moving on to operating expenses, year to date, we are better than planned by $185,000. So year to date, total operating is up from plan by $170,000.
Congratulations.
And may I ask, how much of that might be just a matter of timing of work done and invoices and so on, and how much is actual sort of reduction in spending?
I know that we through August we hadn't received our invoices from Moss Adams yet. So I know $45,000 of that, or $35,000 of that has to do with Moss Adams. So I would say there's probably about $120,000 worth of actual spending that hasn't happened.
Well, the salary and wages don't come back later, right? So those line items are real.
Those line items are
savings. Real savings, yeah.
Well, congratulations to staff for good budget control.
Any other questions on the combined income statement? Okay, moving on to water on page 61 of your packet. Year-to-date operating revenues are down from plan by $4,700. Year-to-date operating expenses are better than planned by $45,000, bringing the total operating year-to-date for water up from plan by almost $41,000. And seeing water not be in the negative for total operating through August is nice to see.
Is that a first?
Obviously, we were budgeting for a loss.
Seems to me that's a first almost.
Why would operations and maintenance be so different than budget?
It has to do that definitely has to do with timing of when we had planned for things to be done in water. So there is some timing in that.
Okay.
Moving on to wastewater on page 37 of your packet. Year-to-date operating revenues for wastewater through August were down from plan by $15,000. Year-to-date operating expenses are better than planned by $62,000. So year-to-date total operating for wastewater is better than planned by $47,000. Moving on to electric on page 39 of your packet. You can see operating revenues for August were up from plan by almost $11,000. And year-to-date total operating revenues are better than planned by $12,500. Year-to-date operating expenses are better than planned by $50,000. So year-to-date total operating is up from plan by $62,000. And feel like that's a good start for electric, considering we don't know what the weather is going to do this year. So.
Yeah, very good.
Moving on to propane on page 42 of your packet. Operating revenues for propane for the month of August were down from plan by $8,200. Year-to-date, they are down from plan by $13,500. Total operating for propane is up from plan, though, by $28,000.
So Kelly, on all of these, the G&A allocations are well under budget. Is that because G&A just isn't spending as much?
No, it's because of the Moss Adams invoices. We just got our Moss Adams invoice, so you'll see that come through in September.
Okay.
And that was about 58,000, if I remember right, Kelly.
The
I just signed.
Yeah, I know the one we just got was a $47,000 invoice, but we did get a small one right before that for I think about 10,000. So I think you're right.
Not so small.
I'm sorry?
Not so small.
Nope, our audits are expensive, that's for sure. Okay, moving on to solid waste on page 43 of your packet. Operating revenues, obviously, for solid waste, because it's a flat fee, it's much easier to budget those costs. So we're right on plan for operating revenues for solid waste. We are over plan in operating expenses, again, due to the number of tips that we had to do for July and August. So you can see we're over plan there by about $14,000. So total operating for solid waste is down from plan by almost $18,000.
I was glad to see the article in the newsletter reminding people what not to put into those bins.
Yes, it's definitely been an issue.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Okay, moving on to I don't really have anything to note about the balance sheet comparison, but again, income statement comparison, you can see the difference in commercial revenue and residential revenue. I like to be able to see that, and the comparison to last year, it really shows just how many more people we have in the valley.
Eric, can you move on to the revenue one in comparison? There we go. Yeah.
And that is all I have on August financials, unless there are any other questions. Okay, moving on to September preliminaries on page 46. You can see operating revenues for September. Residential revenue wasn't as higher than plan as July and August. I think that in September we generally have a higher population in the valley, so you can see it was much closer to our budgeted number. Commercial revenue is still down from plan. So year-to-date operating revenues through September are down from plan by $51,000. But again, you can see the biggest portion of that is the commercial revenue and the base rate issue.
Okay,
Can you describe what you mean by base rate issue?
The previously mentioned the error that was in the budget.
Okay, yes.
Kelly, and when you guys ran the different scenarios of lower revenue, 5%, 10%, et cetera. I mean, when we think about, so right now this is about 3% below plan, but half of that is the base rate issue. If we're kind of keeping track where we are in terms of revenues vis-a-vis those different scenarios you ran, should we be ignoring the base rate discrepancy or including it?
Well, I mean, what was in those three scenarios was what was in the budget. So it definitely, it definitely will have an effect on it.
Yeah. Okay, so right now we're running 3% below, and of course it all depends what the resort does.
Right.
Starting probably in November to see how we're really going to be. So, okay.
I think just as an observation, I believe, and it's observation and not a fact, that one of the reasons residential didn't perform as well, between quotes, than the previous months is that school started. So more family went back to their primary residence. I think that's probably what's happening here.
Yeah, it could be.
That's my observation also. I mean, one of the things we could do is just have a chart that shows resident days. So we could actually see that.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be easy. That would we have the available data.
Yeah, with the days of water use is a very good metric for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll ask Corey to put that together just so we can look at it.
Thanks, Bob.
I'm sure smoke was also an issue.
Also, yes.
Oh, yeah, that's why we weren't there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Any other questions or comments on the combined incomes or the September preliminary? Okay, moving on to cash flow on page 47. We ended September with 1.9 million total operating cash, which was $267,000 better than planned. So still keeping in line with our variance from last month. And again, our low point this year is still December.
Well, that's 2 months in. We're $250,000 ahead. I think this is the time where we might entertain a motion to up board of directors fees. And by the way, that's a joke.
Good.
Any questions on the cash flow?
I'm busy tweeting out Standish's comment just a minute.
Make sure POTUS gets it.
Okay, we'll move on then to budget variances. Again, I've added updated the solid waste overages and dumping fees and salaries and wages through August 31st, as well as snow removal salaries and wages through August 31st.
And what's the snow removal overage, the variance due to?
All the work that Eric and everybody's been doing in snow removal.
So it's the analyses and the contract work and so on.
Whole
That
brain
wasn't
damage.
budgeted.
There's been a lot more repairs on the equipment than was initially anticipated as well.
Okay, there's that too.
One of the tracklesses looks like it has a cracked head or a blown head gasket. May not be good. So there's a lot of issues that are requiring a lot more attention right now than we thought for mechanical. It's old equipment.
Yeah. Okay.
Great to hear that equipment is being prepared.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly.
So Kelly, just remind me, so for the audit, what should we expect for closing out the audit?
Yes, I just heard from Moss Adams yesterday, and they are uploading the draft of the financial statements, and then I have to do my review of them, as well as do our management discussion and analysis portion. And so we've done some work on that, at the request of the board to try to make it a little bit easier to read through and have an explanation of, why things are presented a little bit differently. So I'm going to be working on that next week with Moss Adams, and hopefully, not hopefully, we will have the completed audit to present at the next board meeting.
And the next finance meeting as well.
Right.
Good.
Thank you.
Kelly, you don't have a cold, do you? Or do you have a little cold?
Oh, it's just allergies.
Okay.
It's
Well,
just,
take care of yourself.
yes.
Thanks for all this work too.
So Eric Christensen, is either Eric Rickard or I supposed to talk to Moss Adams between now and completion of the audit?
Eric already has.
I did it before they started, Standish, just to talk about things in general, how I think
Knock it off.
how I think things have gone. And the one thing I talked to her about was, I said I thought things were going very well. And that I thought the relationship between our staff and them was very healthy. I'm trying to think of other things, but the substantive thing I asked for, the substantive thing I said was that for me, and I think for other board members as well, it's very difficult to look at the audit the way it's structured, which I know they have to do, and reconcile it with these statements that we see every month, because
Yeah, it's unintelligible.
there's such a different form.
Yep.
And she suggested that they could actually include in the appendix sort of a reconciliation or things in the form that we would recognize so that
That'd
we
be
could
great.
see.
And
So
that's
that
what I'm
was-
going to be working on next.
Yeah, that's what they've been doing. That's what's been taking so long, is that
Yeah.
addendum.
Well,
That would be
hopefully
awesome.
we can look at it this time and see if it's worth the time and effort. But that's the substantive thing that I spoke with her about.
And it wasn't much more on their scope and fee to add that in. I want to say it was another $3,000 or $4,000 to do all that. So it wasn't a huge portion of that budget.
Good. Yeah, but I think it was probably 2 months ago when I spoke with her, something like that.
What is our total payment to Moss Adams anticipated to be this year? $50,000?
I think it's around 58.
Yeah, 58.
Wow. Okay. It keeps going up.
Okay. By the way, to those in the audience, anybody who wants to speak, just raise your hand, and we'll stop and hear what you have to say. Okay, let's go on to item 8B, the Communications Policy 720. Let's see, this was, I guess, I don't know, Bob, are you taking this or Eric?
I'll do it since Jess isn't here. So I guess the bottom line is Jess did a lot of research on communications policies from other districts, as well as CSDA, CMUA, and Aqua, and basically cobbled together something that's pretty industry standard across California special districts. This has been through Communications Committee, and they unanimously recommended adoption.
Thank you.
We just asked for clarification on what is an incident. I assume that was reflected in here.
I didn't check it again after Jess did it, but I presume Jess had included that. And if not, then we can add it, and I will remind her.
What was that about, Bob?
There's a reference in here to incidents, and we asked for a clarification on what was an incident. We had some specific language.
I see.
No, she did do it. Notices include are not limited to utility maintenance conservation.
Yeah.
Notices. She added it.
Great. Okay, discussion or questions from board or from the audience?
Yeah, I have some concerns with the title, calling it the Director of Communications is kind of ambiguous. I mean, if you look at page 53, if you do an abbreviation, it gets real confusing if you're talking about an elected board director or the director of the communications operation. If you don't say every time, this is the director of the communications, it's confusing. I would recommend that we come up with a different title. My personal recommendation is a communication coordinator.
Peter, this just applies to all directors. This isn't a set position or a chairman of any particular board or the president of the board. This is just all directors. There's not a person. It's just directors generically.
Well, who's in charge of directing the communications? It's not a specific person.
The official spokesperson for the district is the president of the board or their designee.
Well, there was two things. One was the what's called, it was the acronym POI, which is the general manager.
Yeah, PIO, Public Information Officer.
Yeah, there's that person who's the general manager. And then there's this paragraph about the directors, that apply to all directors when a director is talking about the district's position on an issue. And as it says, the official spokesperson is the president of the board. But of course, when customers ask a director or a question, you just need to clarify whether you're talking about it, the board's position as a whole, or whether it's just your own opinion. Does that help, Peter, or are you still questioning?
Well, that was when I first read through it, my concern was that if my position was different from the majority of the board, I wasn't allowed to express it.
No, you just have to clarify that that's your position, not the board's position. That's all it says. A director may clarify his/her position on an issue if requested to do so. So you can share your opinion for sure. Just you can't say it's the board's position if it's not. That's all.
Okay. It's kind of
And the
confusing.
purpose of this is to clarify and codify how we communicate with the public. Is that the bottom line?
The whole policy, yeah, I guess that how the district communicates with the public, whether it's staff or the board.
Yeah.
So I have
well,
go
ahead.
I have an example of a practical example. So lately we received a notice informing us that because of PSPS, we were going to switch to the power plant here, the fuel plant, and which is great. We did not receive a similar message telling us we are back on the grid. I just wonder how these decisions are made.
So that particular notice, Bertrand, actually said
yes,
we will be going back on power. I forget what day it was, and it gave a date and a time. And since that didn't change, there was, in my opinion, no need to follow up because we did what the original notice said, which gave a specific date and time to go back on.
Okay, so I just was too quick reading it. Okay, thank you. So if it's not different to what you said in the first one, you are not going to notify.
Yeah, nothing changes.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to make work. I'm trying to be as possible.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. It's just I didn't see it, and so now I know to look for it. And so if there is anything different, you will notify. But if you already say when you are coming back online, that's it. Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It looks like Eric is muted.
Oh, did he mute himself?
No, I did not unmute myself, and I lost connection for a while. When it came back, I was muted and I couldn't unmute myself.
You're taking Peter's job now, disconnecting.
Well, Peter, you can have it back.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
I have two things that I'd like, well, several things I'd like to add. When I first started talking about a communication policy, it was because I was hearing various things from different community members. And I think this policy does a very good job of speaking to policies associated with communications that go from the district, either the district staff or directors, to the public. But other than a brief mention about the customer service folks, there's very little about what happens in the reverse. And it's what happens in the reverse where I've heard over the years that I've been on the board from various people. So there are a couple things I'd like to at least consider adding, and it may need to be considered by the communications committee. But the first is, what happens when a communication comes from a member of the public to directors? And I think there's a distinction here, because if it comes to only one or two directors, then I believe that communication can be considered private. If it's just held within those two directors and whoever is communicating with them, or that one director, it can be considered private and doesn't need to be made public. However, with the person who, in the public's permission, if a director thinks it's, hey, that's a good idea, we should expose the other directors or staff to this, with that permission, you could forward it on. The second circumstance is, what if a communication goes to more than two directors? In that circumstance, I think it's a public communication. I think it's good policy to say that's a public communication, and that we will be publishing that communication in the next board meeting packet, just so that everybody can see it. Everybody can see what the more than two directors have seen, more than what the general manager has seen. And to that end, I would like for us to consider adding to our standard agenda, either just before or just after comments from the audience, a topic, a title called Written Communications. It would be handled just like comments from the audience. There could be no actions taken, but just like with comments from the audience, if there's something that the board would like to assign to a committee or to the staff to follow up on, we could do that. But other than that, there could be no action taken. So that's if there's more than 2 directors. So that's one chunk that I think would be valuable to add to this policy. The other is, and I don't know if this is really just a best practice or it's not really a policy, but it seems to me that, and this is again an issue that was brought up to me over the years multiple times, that all communications from the public, whether it's to directors or individually or multiply or to the general manager, it seems to me that the whoever sent the communication, there should be acknowledgement that the communication has been received. And it might just be by the individual director or the pair of directors that have been contacted. It could be by the general manager if everybody's been contacted. That may just be a best practice rather than something that needs to be written into a policy. So that is maybe a topic for discussion. And then the third thing, last thing, is around community notices. You know, again, this has come up most recently in relationship to the fire that was out beyond Lake Margaret, but it's come up multiple times regarding highway closures and so on. And I'm just wondering if we should add something under community notices that says something like events occurring outside of Kirkwood, but which may have an impact on Kirkwood residents, such as highway closures and wildfires within the general Kirkwood area.
It's in there.
If the district has information about these events. I know there was something in there.
It's there.
Yeah, Eric, we addressed that.
Oh, I was just going to say, but what if there's no other communication from another governmental entity? It's just something that we know it's going on.
We just decided that if it wasn't something the district had accountability for, then we're not going to be obligated to try to be the scout for those items. So we did have a discussion on that topic, and we don't always have staff. We're not staffed 24 hours a day either. So we didn't want to set an expectation that if something happens in the area that's not related to the utility itself, that we had an obligation to report that.
Okay, yeah, okay. I mean, I think I probably to some extent disagree with that, but if that's what the committee and the rest of the boards thinks. I mean, let's take to the fire out beyond Lake Margaret. Lots of people could see something was happening. And I know that Rick, for example, knew what was happening, but nothing went out to say, hey, by the way, this is what's happening. There was no governmental entity that I know of that communicated with us. There was something happening that some people were quite concerned about it. Others were just curious.
Bob is referring to a liability that we can't fulfill. Is there any formula for best efforts basis on?
Well, we discussed this specific one. Rick, do you want to?
Yeah, again,
remind?
It's something that is an event that's threatening Kirkwood. In that particular incident, it was not threatening Kirkwood. The fire department was in contact with El Dorado County Camino Dispatch, and if it became an incident where it would have threatened the community, then certainly we would have reported that out. But if we become the messengers for the community, and then God forbid something happens and we fail to communicate that event, the community could come back, and create basically a forensic trail saying, hey, why didn't you notify us? I lost my home and you didn't notify us. It's the district's fault, it's the fire department's fault. both counties have public information officers. Both counties have, through California OES, a way to communicate emergencies and actually broadcast that out. So I would caution us to become the newspaper for the community in that way.
And if our own fire department were involved, then it's part of our issue, and we would do it. We just were very nervous about the idea of being the newspaper for, the community for all issues that might be of concern.
And Ann had a question. I unmuted.
Hi.
There she is.
Hi, thanks. Thanks,
Hi,
Eric.
Ann.
You're welcome.
Both sides of the coin sound really smart to me. And I was wondering if a middle ground might be in the PUD newsletter to just let people know where they can get the information, not from the Kirkwood Fire Department if there's a fire in Lake Margaret. And then, we can say, oh, I know where to get the information, and I'm not going to call Chief Rick and bug him about it. So maybe that'll sort of solve both problems.
Yeah, that's a really good point on. We remember we talked about that at communications, that we were updating the website to have all the current links, but we could do a newsletter article as well to reference them back to the website when that gets updated with all those current links. So that's a really good point on.
I think it's a good idea. And I think in that newspaper article, though, I think that we should make clear then what it is we do communicate in accordance with this community notices section of the policy.
Well, that's why I asked to define what an incident was of what we report on. So we attempted to do that, Eric.
Okay.
Maybe there's a way to do it better.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's just then let's let people know, because when it comes to fire, any fire that people see and they see smoke, we may know, or Rick may know what's going on, but they don't. So the fire department may know that's not a risk to Kirkwood, but the people witnessing things don't. And so I think we need to be clear what it is will be communicated. So, for example, when the district knows that there's a risk to the community, it will be communicated via whatever channel is used.
So
if you hear
that's what it says right here, right there.
I'm just saying included in the newsletter, though. Don't just keep it here.
Right. We would reference the policy in the newsletter, I think would be a good way to tell them too.
I think the newsletter is fine, but I think ultimately when we redo the website, there should be a section on fires. We got to get used to it, I guess.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And just say who handles, how are forest incidents handled, and who are the agencies, and how do you find more, and where can you learn about air quality? We may want to have a general thing there that just reminds people where to find it, because remembering that the newsletter a year ago had an article on this isn't going to be as useful as having a section on. Unfortunately, we need a section on forest fires.
Well, we'll definitely talk about that with Jessica.
So, thanks for the suggestion. I think it's really good.
Yeah.
Sure.
One thing I wanted to go back to really quick, Eric, before we get too far afield, just to clarify, any communication to any director or any staff member relative to the business of the district is disclosable. There is no private messages at all. So if
I understand that this is disclosable. Okay. That I understand. Okay. I'm just saying
I just want to make sure everybody else understood. I know you got it.
What is it that we would put into the packet under an item called written communications? It's just those things that are sent to more than two board members or to the general manager. That's policy, really, not a not a will you plow my driveway thing. It's a policy thing.
Yeah, no, got it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure everybody else understood that there's no secrecy. We're all fully transparent. And
Right. So those are my comments. So I don't know. I don't have specific language for the first things I talked about, which were communications from the public to the directors, and whether or not there should be something about acknowledging any communication from the public by those who have received it. But I don't know how we want to do that. If you guys agree that we should have those things.
Why don't we follow up in the communications committee and get something written up? Okay.
I appreciate that.
We'll take that. And then the other suggestion is that there's, in the standard agenda, there's a 5A and a 5B.
Right.
And 5A is comments from the audience, and 5B is written communications that arrived since the last meeting.
Yeah.
Well, within a certain, before the meeting, like no
Yeah.
later than the Monday before or something like that.
Yeah, whatever.
When we
Yeah.
send the packet out, I mean, we send out supplemental stuff, a couple days before. It's not a big deal to add it. I'll add it on the next agenda.
Okay.
That's an easy one to do. The written acknowledgement is the only thing I would say is if we're going to put that in as the policy, for example, Friday, I got 648 emails. I don't have time to respond to 648 emails for each person.
Well, why not?
Because you want me to do the real work of the district. So just, if we do add that in, we should really clarify.
No, I don't know that it should be. Like I said, it should just, I mean, really, it's just a best practice. It's,
Whatever.
Yeah, we try. We do try.
Yeah, I think I'd like to support that concept of best practice. We don't want to constrain ourselves legally by our policy. And so we really need to stick to actually in the policies for strictly to the KMPUD business. However, I think for the Margaret fire, it would have been nice if I think the newsletter is too far too far apart, so it's not current enough. It's tell you what happened in the past. So the website is the right place to have a little mention. There is a fire there. It's handled by these agencies and put the link. But I think you need to be proactive because people were asking a lot of questions during that Margaret fire.
But again, as Rick said, that fire had nothing to do with Kirkwood and was of no danger to Kirkwood. And it was on a weekend. So
when people don't know that. Yeah. So I don't say we need to put that in the policy. I just think as a best practice, if Rick knows it's no danger to Kirkwood, maybe we should have a little mention of that on the website. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other comments regarding the adoption of the consent calendar? So I guess this will come back for the next board meeting.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
it's not on COMCOM, so it's going to be probably December.
Okay.
It's not on the COM. I mean, I guess we don't have time to add it. Do we, Bob? No.
I'd have to ask Jess. I think we do.
I think we do too, because it's what, the 19th?
Yeah.
Okay, then we have time. I'll have Jess add it on. Assuming we can make the corrections and.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Eric and Bob, well, it's against my policy to agree with Bertrand. I actually do in this case. And, the Lake Margaret fire, if there's a way of getting that out, in a best efforts way, not on the website. I'm not going to go to the PUD website to figure out the Lake Margaret fire. In a way that, we're not like creating a policy that creates a liability or an obligation for the district. I think a little bit of sort of best efforts communication would be a good thing. It's just a personal feeling that I take Rick's point. We don't want to obligate ourselves to be the newsletter for the district, but who else is going to circulate that common interest information? So I'm not interested in creating a liability. I would like us to be proactive in communications if we can on a best efforts basis using email, not the website. Those are just some comments for the communication committee and staff to consider, please.
Okay, thanks, Standish.
I concur with that too. You could see the fire from a lot of people's homes, and it went on for 3 days. They dumped water on it for 3 days. I mean, I think we could have been a little bit more proactive with regards to that incident. And I'd also like to see the language made a little more specific in the next edition of this policy.
What language?
When you're talking about director, be specific. Director of communications versus director of the board. Okay.
We don't have a
Page
director
50.
of communications.
Well, the policy says we did. Unless I'm misreading it. Page 53, I believe it was. I can't pull it up because
I don't see director of communications on page 53.
I'm going to try page 54.
We can look it look at it at the communication.
Yeah, I would just
Yeah.
try to make it well, so a simple person can read it. Okay. I thought it was confusing.
If you have a suggestion on how to make it clearer, please provide it.
Okay, I can't do that right now.
Okay, but prior to the meeting, please
Yeah,
help
no
us out.
problem.
Otherwise, I
No
don't know
problem.
quite what to
Yeah,
do. Thank you.
yeah,
Okay, any other comments on the communications policy? Okay, and thank you, An, for your great suggestion. Okay, we go on to item 8C, performance reporting and aquifer levels. Hi, Brandy.
Good morning, everyone. So taking a look first at performance reporting, as you can see in September, our production was down. Our total production was 379,000 kilowatt hours, of which almost 50,000 kilowatt hours was generated at the powerhouse due to the various PSPS outages at PG&E because of wildfires. Our losses, our unidentified losses for the month were 14%, which brings us to 9% for the year. And then if we look at propane, our usage was actually up, a little colder in September, and we have a negative loss for the month. We're running negative 1% for the year to date on propane.
Brandy, did we end up negative for the full year last year, ended June 30th?
I believe we did, Standish. I believe it was a very low negative number, but I think it was slightly negative.
Thank you.
Any other questions before I move on to water and wastewater?
So if we do end up with negative on a regular basis, do we have a mechanisms to, I don't know, credit people? Or, I mean, not every month, but I think we need to look at it so we should not measure more than we actually sell. So I'm a bit, I just don't know how we could handle that so we stay on the top of that situation.
In my experience here, we've been tracking performance reporting for, gosh, 6 or 7 years, and it seems to alternate. We'll be slightly negative one year, slightly positive the next. It stays always very close to zero. So we've never gone any further than that.
Well, and I think isn't it because the measurement is just so difficult because different temperatures cause the gas to expand or contract differently in the tank, and so you don't really know what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, physically negative is impossible. It means we've generated methane from somewhere. Propane, rather.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, if it's average over the year, I'm fine with that. But if we have a trend that is consistent in one direction, then we may need to think about how we can adjust it.
Understood. Okay, on to water. For the month of September, our production was 983,000 gallons. We did have some hydrant flushing, some system testing, and our unidentified system losses for the month were 24%, bringing us to 17% for the year.
How much of that, Brandy, do you think is just how water levels are measured in the tanks and, you know, things that you've mentioned before? And how much of this do you sense that some of this is just a measurement issue rather than an actual loss issue?
I do. I think that the jump that you see there can be attributed to a measurement issue. We have not had any evidence of large-scale leaks anywhere in the system. But as you recall, we also estimate our facility use.
And we also were doing water model testing. Our engineer was out flowing a lot of hydrants this month to finalize he's about to give us the draft water model, so we had to redo a bunch. So that is a part of that huge spike.
it is.
I see.
Actually, yeah, I'd like to say that if it was just measurement, then they should average them out. And if it's not averaging out, that means it is actual loss.
Right. Yeah. Right. And to Eric's point, we did get an estimate, but there were a lot of tests done in the month of September. All right, and lastly, we will look at wastewater. We continue to have a pretty good trend there, slightly less wastewater metered at the plant, 741,000 gallons. Unidentified, unmetered usage is 76,600 for an unmetered use of 10% for the month, 17% for the year. And then one last note on aquifer levels. Our average for the month of September for well 4.5, our average aquifer level was 138 feet, and that is slightly lower this time of year than average over the last 10 years. We had notified at the operations committee that we had to scale back the well 2 production because our aquifer level there was lower. It has begun to recover, as you can see here. And so we expect the 4 or 5 levels to start improving at the next reporting cycle.
Great, thanks.
And that is all I have on this.
Okay, any questions for Brandy? If not, we can go on to item 8D, chipping 2021-22, planning and funding. Rick.
Well, good morning, everybody, once again. So the background of chipping, back in 2006, when I first started as fire chief for the district, really wasn't any chipping in Kirkwood unless the homeowner hired a contractor to come out and do some beautification around their property. And then I was notified by Alpine County Public Works that there was some RAC funding, that's the Resource Advisory Committee funds, for up to $10,000 to be used toward chipping if we'd like to in the Kirkwood area. And again, these funds were from Alpine County. So we actually back in 2006, 2008, hired a contractor to come up and chip for Kirkwood at a one-time occasion. It was usually in October to go around and do some community chipping to get the miscellaneous branches that had fallen from the winter before. That was a pretty successful program, and people were very receptive to it. We actually had 15 participants back then, and the total cost for me to hire a contractor, including the administrative costs the district spent, was around $3,000 at the time. Over the next few years, and also I should say, Alpine paid for it. I included residents in Amador County with that program at the time. And then the following years, I actually asked the Amador Fire Safe Counselors for funding to support the annual chipping. And they did so, and it worked out pretty well. But unfortunately, the funding from the counties dried up. It was no longer available. So as some of you may remember, we asked the community to purchase a chipper so we could have more control and also chip on more of a regular basis during the summer. And so the community stepped forward and donated a brand new chipper, which at the time cost us about $13,000. And since that time, we've been chipping, 2 or 3 times a year, again, with good participation, up to 15 to 20 participants. And even though we put out in the newsletters, the chipping requirements, it has to be within 6 inches or less in diameter, and please stack your material on the side of the road in a nice even stack, not a big beaver dam, so our staff could quickly remove the items off the side of the roadway and chip back onto the property. Though most people do that, a lot of people don't, and so we're sometimes left with debris that's unchippable, and then we get phone calls, why didn't you pick up this large log? Why didn't you pick up this 2x4? And so administrative time increased just because people really liked the program, but they also didn't really follow the rules. And then we get to last year. CAL FIRE came up and did defensible space inspections. And also, as you know, we've had some extreme fire years. And so public awareness on fire has increased quite a bit. And then, of course, this year with COVID, we've had a lot more residents in the valley that have time to move items off their property, including taking trees down and enhancing the program for us, meaning that they're not just grabbing the few items or few limbs that are falling off their trees. They're actually cutting trees down and then putting them to the side of the road and expecting us to take away their large amount of debris, chippable debris. So I took a look at the numbers and actually had Tommy Baggett, our staff accountant, pull numbers and times for me. Last year, we spent 127 hours total doing the chipping program. This year, we're going to go well over 200 hours, which includes having to go out and get rent a chipper, because our chipper, which works really well, because we've had so much time spent on it, it actually, the belts have broken on it, so we've had to do extra maintenance on it. But as you can see in the Kirkwood Valley now, there's still plenty of piles of debris for us to chip. And I think we'll probably spend over $2,000 or 200 hours this year to complete the project at a cost of well over $4,000, probably about $5,000 to complete chipping this year versus the about $3,000 that we spent last year. So with all this said, currently the chipping is being funded from the general fund through district staff members of different pay levels, pay grades. And so my proposal is that we go back to the community and say, hey, we would like to continue the chipping program, which I think is a great program and everybody appreciates it, but actually have it supported through the fundraising, the 501c3, and hire part-time either volunteer firefighters or somebody from the community to come and help us on a more regular basis next summer. And again, fund the chipping program through the 501c3 and not through the general fund or the fire department with the KMPUD. So with that, I open it up to any questions or comments.
The only thing I would add to that, Rick, and Brandy maybe can expound on it. With the increased amount of labor, we're pulling our operators away from water, wastewater, electric, and propane tasks that are critical to those utilities to do chipping. So we really support Rick's recommendation that we either hire seasonal or we hire out a chipping company professional to come in and do it.
I have a couple questions, Rick. The $5,000 plus, is that for the total cost this year, or is that in addition from this point on?
So total cost for this year this is just for labor. For this year alone, we've spent $3,058, and we're not out of the woods, and that doesn't include maintenance parts for the chipper itself and the rental of the chipper that we have on deck right now, which is about $1,000. So again, it's about $5,000.
And fuel.
And fuel and miscellaneous items.
Okay, and then going forward, the funding from the 501c3, would the intention be to only rent chippers from now on if it's done by labor that we hire, or is the intention to bring in a contractor just to do it in a discrete amount of time?
It could go either way. The nice thing about doing it in-house is we have more control, we can do it on a more regular basis. As you know, maybe you don't know, when I originally hired the contractor to come up and do this back in 2006, 7, 8, 9, those years, one, it was a challenge to find a contractor willing to come to Kirkwood. And two, it became very cost prohibitive. In fact, we reached out to a contractor this year, and the estimate for them to come up and complete the chipping piles was what, $9,000, Eric? I think it was pretty hefty price tag.
$385 an hour.
Yeah, $385 an hour. So again, if we could focus some of the fundraising funds like we did in the winter when we hired the additional firefighter for someone to come in and chip for $15 an hour when we needed it, as we needed it, I think would be a better way of doing it.
But we would then rent a chipper, or would we be purchasing a new chipper?
No, we would be using the chipper that we have now, but then the cost for the trackless machines and the ancillary O&M costs to do it, we could reimburse the district through the 501c3 for that equipment time and use.
Okay.
I'd like to suggest a different approach, if I can. What I heard is that the demand for chipping is now larger than just an occasional activity during the summer, and that we would like to have a budget for providing chipping service for the community. So I would first separate in the decision that this is going to be a budgeted item and a service provided and some estimate of how much demand there would be. I would separate that from how it's paid for, because what I'd like to know is approximately how many customers had chipping done this year, what was the total cost, divide that, and to know what does it cost per customer to do it. Because I think one of the things we should consider is, let's say it's a $75 charge or $100, I don't know what the number would be, but to raise volunteer funds to support somebody else's chipping, I mean, it's not applied evenly. It might make more sense, or I'd like to at least consider saying, if you like chipping, you know, it's some simple way to collect a fee to have it done, as opposed to you know, this really isn't a charitable contribution that benefits everybody. It's a specific service, so we should at least consider how we fund it. But I'm totally in favor of having it be a budgeted item. With labor supplied to it that does that, so it doesn't take away from everything else.
So may I ask people's opinion? I think this should be assigned to a committee in preparation for our budgeting cycle. Which committee? Is this primarily a finance issue? Is it an operations issue?
If it's I'd probably throw it to finance so we can work out the numbers.
Standish, would that be okay with you?
Sure. I followed Rick's suggestion, and you know, I'm open to it. I mean, I think we need more activity for volunteer firefighters, and I get what he's saying. But it's fine. That's just my opinion. To answer your question, Eric Rickert, I'm fine assigning it to finance, but I'm fine assigning it to operations if you prefer that route too.
Well, I think that the first thing is the dollars part. So the finance, I think at some point it may come to operations just to say, you know, what the hiring would be. I mean, depending on what the decision is, you know, the how-tos and the actual implementation.
Yeah, as an aside, when the Cal Fire people came around about a year ago, I did not get a notice, but I reached out to our HOA manager and asked for tree people, and people cut my trees. And I can't tell you how many of my neighbors have asked for the tree cutting service referral. So there are definitely people up here, you know, spending more time collecting stuff on their property and paying more attention to their property than they have in the past. And so another route would be to, well, another idea related, not in line with this, is to put out a, you know, here are people who can service your trees kind of thing in the newsletter. And Mike Rubini is the one who did mine.
I think we do have a list of some on our website, but we'll make sure he's on there if he's not. On had a question, Eric.
Yes, On, hi.
Hi. One thing that I'd be a little bit concerned about if you wanted to charge the homeowner for chipping is that they might decide, oh, well, forget it, I'm not going to do it. So if my neighbor has lots of stuff that could be chipped and he decides he doesn't want to do it because he doesn't want to pay the $75, it puts my home a little more at risk if there's a fire. So I sort of do feel like it's a community service if I get all my stuff out in the right way to be chipped to the neighbors around me. So I would just sort of want the idea of charging homeowners just to be considered from that point of view as well. Maybe it's the best idea, but there might be a drawback.
So Anna, I have a question for you. You were so involved with the great fundraising effort this past year. How would you feel, just as a person in your position, who I hope will be in that position multiple years, for about including this in a in fundraising effort as one of the goals?
I think it's up to you guys. Like, what's the most important thing to raise money for? But oh, you mean like within the firefighting area of raising money?
Yeah. I mean, do you think that you would be comfortable basically asking the community for funds for this kind of a purpose, just from a fundraiser's perspective? Or would you say, oh, wow, this is an operational thing. Nobody's going to want to donate funds for that.
Well, I guess it would be that Rick and you all would sort of decide what are the most important things to raise money for. And then if the chipping service was, high up there, then maybe a little more of an explanation as to why this helps.
Yeah.
Because probably a lot of people think, oh, it's just to get the log off my yard or something. But really, if it really is, a big part of fire protection, and like you guys were saying earlier, we're all slightly freaked out about fires a bit more than we were last year. Then I think a great case could be made, and in a way, it's sort of more hands-on. Like, I'm looking at my yard, saying, "Oh my gosh, if I got rid of this would actually really help. So I'd like to support the firefighter to help me get rid of it."
Yeah, good. Okay,
Eric, one thing, and since we have Supervisor Brown on, I know in the past, Amador County Fire Safe has provided the Pine Needle dumpsters, Mace Meadows, and I think they have one other station. But I think that program was canceled, if I recall correctly. And so that's something we could consider as another option, is to rent a 40-yard bin for people to dispose of their green waste only. We could do that. I mean, what I can tell you is on my property in Pioneer, I have to cut all my own stuff and I have to burn it or chip it myself. I have to pay for it out of my own pocket. I don't get the freebie. So people can burn, they can do it themselves too. So there is always that option, unless the HOAs don't allow them to burn in accordance with the county regulations.
I don't believe me. I don't think we'd have any money burning. In any case, I'd like to ask the Finance Committee to take this up in time.
I have a few comments I'd like to make. First, I support definitively the concept of a green bin, because it's a very cost-effective way to actually do that, to support the community in keeping our valley fire safe. And many people would do it because we don't like to have these stacks staying for weeks or months by our properties. So I really think we should look into it, because it's probably much cheaper than anything else to remove a big amount of fuel load. So second thing I'd like, which I've not heard at all, but I know in the past it was entertained, and I know there was some successful response to that, which is we also need to keep looking at grant. I mean, there are grants for fire protections, and I know the district was successful a few years ago to get one. I know that Eastern Alpine was actually last year had a huge grant of, I think, $80K for that. So I think we need to keep that as one of the avenues that we explore every year to make sure we can actually get grants to help us funding that fire suppression. And then I'd like to say that I agree with both Bob and Rick, and that's totally possible. I think it's time to have this chipping program as an independent unit, so we can actually work on its finance. And I also support what Rick was saying, that certainly using volunteering and 501Cs could be one of the avenues we look at how we pay for it. And I totally understand Anne's point about making sure we make it easy for people to do their fire suppression because it's a whole valley which is at stake.
I think Cheryl had a question.
Hey, before
Okay,
you do
Cheryl.
that, Eric Rickert, I was going to ask Cheryl, who now has a question. After you ask your question, Cheryl, you're front and center in our annual fundraising effort. How would you feel about a portion of what and how do you think the community would feel about a portion of what we raise on an annual basis being allocated to the chipping program, much as we do with the seasonal firefighter in the winter?
That's actually what I was going to try and address, Standish. I mean, I think if we look at the successful fundraising that we did this year, it was because we had a very specific message, a very specific need, and that was true for both the playground and the fire department. And I think if we start dipping into those funds, I think that's going to it's going to dilute our success.
Sure.
And so I would advocate that we not use the 501c3 to fund the chipping program. I think we need to dig a little deeper and get a little bit more creative as to how we might do that. So that's my 2 cents, if you will.
Thanks, Cheryl.
I want to, if I can, I want to reinforce what Cheryl said. The idea of voluntary fundraising for a permanent operational cost, those are just inconsistent.
Correct.
Inconsistent things. That's why I think we should seriously look at having it staffed with it, as an independent effort, and then separately figuring out the best way to finance it. We're not talking about a large amount of money in any case.
Okay, I'd like the finance committee to look at this, and my only last suggestion is that it not be, we not have a department called chipping, that it be it be a sub part of our fire department budget, but that's something for the committee to consider. You
don't want a director of chipping? Because I thought we should hire that.
I'd like it if it were a vice president, yes, but a director.
Oh, all right. I could compromise it then.
Okay.
That's like a cable TV fund, right? We haven't had cable up here for years.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the board considering this and understanding that, right now the program is really detrimental to our operations and just getting normal activities done. And by committing this to a more fluent method is going to, one, streamline and make it a better program for the community, but two, it'll help the operations staff as well.
Yeah, well, this is a cost of success as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it's a successful program.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to item 8E, the continuing declaration of emergency under Resolution 20-09, authorizing emergency repair work to the district powerhouse to remedy a broken pipe and/or fitting and other work. Eric?
We have a contractor that is we've selected to complete the work, Campbell Construction out of Sutter Creek. However, we have yet to get the entire price from him, but he has committed to getting it done this month, if at all possible. So because it is an emergency declaration, the board must reconsider it at every meeting to see if we still have an emergency, which staff believes we do. So we recommend that the board affirm by at least a 4/5 vote that the emergency declaration continues.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the board or from the audience?
I have one question for Brandy, if I can. I do remember a couple years ago when we were moving the powerhouse to standby instead of operational, that would have required a lesser permit. And I can't remember whether we pursued that or decided to just leave the issue alone. So can you remind me where we are on that?
We did get some permit modifications regarding how often and what type of testing that we do there. We have had a conversation with the Air Board about trying to eliminate the ammonia system, and they were not supportive of that idea
because of the fact that if the out valley line goes down, we will be back on the powerhouse for our entire generation until that is repaired.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And if not, I'd like to entertain a motion to, what's the right word? Affirm the emergency declaration for emergency powerhouse repair work.
So moved.
Who was that?
Standish so moves, and Peter, was that
Okay.
a second?
I'll
can move,
second.
Peter. Peter, you
No,
want to move?
No, you already moved. I'll second that move.
Okay. I guess roll call, Peter.
Sure. Rickert,
Aye.
O'Grady,
Aye.
Epstein,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Item 9 is general manager's report.
We've been getting ready for winter. Not a whole lot to report. One thing, and I don't know if you're going to cover it under operations, Rick, so I'll steal that thunder from you. We did get a notice of violation on wells 4 and 5 for exceeding our manganese MCL limits, averaged over the year. It's apparently been going on since July, as the first it was brought to management's attention through the Department of Drinking Water. So we'll be looking into ways to remedy that. We can ask for a variance. It seems very unlikely we'll get that. So in all likelihood, we'll have to manage how we use those wells. One is a little bit higher than the other, but in all likelihood, it's probably going to be a sand filter at those 2 wells to deal with the manganese issue. There's no monetary fine associated with the notice of violation at this time. There was no recommendation from the regulator to fine us for this. So we're looking into that, but you will see a blip on water in terms of necessary capital expenditures to fix that issue. Other than that, I really
what is MCLO? Is there CL is chlorine or chloride?
No, it's the I even forget what.
Or is that the volume or?
It's not a volume. It's a mandated something limit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so
it's not a unit of measure. I mean,
got it.
There's an MCL for everything, but
I see.
You measure manganese in micrograms per liter, for example, but you may measure another one in milligrams per liter. The MCL is just the limit
I see.
by the regulator.
Got it.
Eric, but we didn't detect that ourselves. Somebody else did.
It was we received reports, and I don't know that anyone caught it, and so the regulator caught it.
That's not good.
No.
I'm just trying to understand the procedure. Do we do our own testing, or is it a third party?
We send our testing to a laboratory. They return the results to us, as well as uploading them to the state. And the state was notified by the laboratory that we had exceedances, and then issued a notice of violation.
Okay.
Okay, is that all? I know you wanted to mention progress on the meters.
Progress on that. We've been going around, and we're continuing to go around with the district engineer, reviewing those, and some customers, we've had some compliance. I did receive the indemnification agreement from district council, so we'll be getting that out there as well. Brandy, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that that sums it up. We're going to continue looking at all of the meters and issue a report.
I guess my question is, for the high-risk meters, high-risk situations, do you feel like those will be remedied before November, the end of November?
Not in all cases.
Okay,
Bertrand, I know you wanted to make a comment here, and
Yeah.
which may go to a committee then to consider.
Yes, so I'm mostly going to talk about the meter enclosure for the propane, because it actually has more drastic requirement than the electrical one. And so first thing I'd like to say, just to frame what is I want to discuss is, so there are basically new standards that have been developed, and that's fine. and it should apply definitively to any new construction. That's totally okay. Now we're talking about the retrofit section of it. So we're basically asking people to upgrade the existing meter that has been approved either by KMPUD or by previous entity MU, which the KMPUD purchased with the liabilities coming with it. So the risk assessment has been made by district, and I'm also fine with that. I would just actually like to ask for that risk assessment. I don't know if it's completed yet. I mean, between the three categories, which are high risk, medium risk, and low risk, I think this should be, I'd like to see it. And I personally think it should be a public document that people can look at. Then the next thing is, I want to make sure when we do this retrofit, we want to do it in a supportive ways, because people have this meter for many years and been approved previously. And the second thing is that we want to make sure we apply the same standard to everybody. And that includes not only the 48 meters that have been deemed with some level of risk, low, medium, or high, but the whole valley in general. So we cannot basically ask some people to meet some standard and other people not to meet the same standard. Okay, so
why would you suggest that they're doing that?
Let me finish.
Just a second.
Yeah.
So we can't have discussion about this because it's not an agenda item. I just want to have Bertrand have his say, because he sent me an email. I said this is where he could talk about it, and then we'll sign it to a committee for consideration. But we just can't have discussion about it, and we certainly can't take any action on it. So go ahead, Bertrand.
Yeah. So for example, specifically, the new requirement for the propane meter includes building a closed enclosure with a fancy and expensive louver vent. There are two models that have been pre-approved. One of them costs $350. The other one is in excess of $1,000. And I don't think, in my opinion, that the district can request that only some customers have to basically fit this requirement. So I think, again, if we are going to have specific requirement of propane meter to be enclosed with this expensive louver, there should be a program over time that everyone in the valley need to come up to that standard. There is no, for me, it's not possible that we ask some people to meet higher standards. Then we have these waivers. And so basically, same thing is, we are going to ask people, the 48 people that are, I'm not talking about the high risk that need to be tackled because they pose an immediate risk. I'm talking about the so-called medium risk and low risk. So people have a choice for the low risk to basically sign a waiver. Again, why would you ask specific customer to sign a waiver and for not meeting the current standard that we have, and other people that have not been deemed low risk but still don't meet the standard? So that's something I think I could see that actually if we end up shutting off utilities to some people because they don't sign the waiver, that we will end up with actually lawsuit implying uneven treatment and possibly discrimination. And I really don't want us to be there. Another point I want to make is the district should try his best to help the people retrofit. And I know there is some good effort made for that. But further, for example, the design plan that was provided by the district and the engineer doesn't fit many situations. The problem is people already have their home, they are constrained of size and location, and some cannot basically fit the requirement, the physical requirement, not the technical requirement that are described into this paperwork. So the district staff currently say that any modification to the standard plan must be signed off by a licensed civil engineer, and that such signed plan will be also checked by the district civil engineer. Why do we have two civil engineers involved here? So if the district is going to check with the civil engineer that whatever is proposed is okay, why do we have to put another cost burden to the homeowner to basically find a civil engineer to certify the plan, which is going to add cost to the retrofit? So that's basically the few points I'd like to make. So, and in light of and that's why I oppose the minute the way they are, because they include basically all these rules for the risk categories, which I think should be discussed by the board before they actually put to work.
Okay, Bertrand, thank you. So Peter, I'd like this assigned to the operations committee.
Okay.
Basically take the policy or the document that we've.
And I will send a written document to operation committee,
Okay.
so they have basically more details on my request.
Just send it. Go ahead and send it to Eric, and he'll include it in the committee packet. And so we'll use what we have as a starting point, and then we can discuss these several points that Bertrand has brought up. Okay.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, thank you. Eric, do you have anything else on the general manager's report?
Oh, no, I was done half an hour ago.
Operations report. Rick, anything else? Rick, are you there?
Let me see. He's muted. Quit muting yourselves, staff and board members. Stop it.
I haven't touched it.
Oh,
yeah,
well,
it's on your end, dude.
It's not on my end.
We're not muting ourselves.
Yeah.
It must be you, Eric.
Hold on. Now it's me. I just muted you. There you go.
Rick, operations.
Okay. As we discussed earlier, the ammonia spill was on September 1st, and we received the invoice from Clean Harbors, which I've asked them to sharpen their pencils and hopefully adjust, but essentially it came in about $19,000, almost $20,000. While Clean Harbors was here mitigating the spill, they did have some equipment issues, which I don't want to pay for. So I haven't received word back from them if that's the final invoice reflecting the equipment issues or not, but just wanted to bring it to the board's attention. But for operations, my report's brief. We are scrambling, getting ready for winter. As you can imagine, this time every year, we're always trying to button up things, continue to get ready for snow removal. And so, no surprises. We were delayed quite a bit this year because of the smoke issues that we had in the valley, of course. And but that said, Brandy's done an excellent job keeping staff focused and oriented toward getting things done. And we look forward to maybe a couple more weeks of good weather to button things up. And that's essentially my report, unless there's any questions about anything else that the board would like to ask.
Yeah, and we're fully staffed.
Oh, so
fully staffed for snow and
Excellent.
Yeah, that's great.
Any questions for Rick? If not, we'll go to standing committee reports. Finance.
We canceled our meeting because of a lack of agenda items, and Kelly was out.
Okay. Planning.
We postponed our meeting for similar reason. Not Kelly, but we didn't have substantive planning issue to discuss.
Thank you, Bertrand. Communications.
A couple items. We reviewed the customer survey results and picked out common topics. We picked out 5, and then each month we provide an overview in the newsletter addressing those specific topics. The first one was on why are things so expensive here? So you all saw that. By the way,
we also saw the nice comment from one of our customers that was sent
Robert
to
Carr.
our, yeah, that was very nice. Well done.
Yeah. We started the renewables program for this month. So far, we've had 22 electric contract for 41 megawatt hours and 14 propane for 60 metric tons. So we're on, which is about 2/3 of what we had last year, and we've only been doing it for a week. So we'll send out another reminder and then keep working on that. And then the other area we're working on are the changes that we'll need to support various paths on snow removal for this coming year, both customer convenience issues as well as budgeting issues, or really revenue issues. And that was it.
Great, thank you. Peter, operations?
We had a short meeting. Maybe Eric or Rick, you could give the board an update on the status of the hazard tree removal along our overhead line.
We're still waiting on final approval from Forest Service for all the trees, which includes last year and this year. We have approval for last year. And once we have that, we're going to get our follower out there. We're having issues with Forest Service about what to do with the slash. Fortunately, Catherine Evatt of Foothill Conservancy turned me on to the CHIPS program. There's one based out of Woodford's, one based out of West Point for dealing with the slash should we have to chip it. It's a pretty good program, employing Native Americans, especially around archaeological sites for which they have concern, but they also do the chipping, and they're pre-approved by the Forest Service. So Brandy has reached out to them, and hopefully we'll have an answer on the slash soon. But as soon as we can get our faller out there, he's going to start falling trees, which I think is after the 15th, I think is when we can, assuming we get permission from the Forest Service, which has been an absolute nightmare.
Okay, well, that's slightly positive.
Slightly positive, a little bit better than last time.
Yeah, definitely.
That it,
and that's all for operations.
Okay. Personnel did meet, and we it was solely about the employee evaluation material that we're going to discuss in closed session. And there is no agenda, or there are no agenda items for this month's personnel committee, which would have occurred a little later this month. Okay, then I think we have temporary advisory playground.
Eric Christensen, why don't you tell us where that stands?
All of the equipment has been mothballed for the winter. It's stored and put back. We did receive one piece of equipment that was damaged upon arrival. Dave is wrangling with Game Time. Told them about it. They sent some repair goo. The damage is more than repair goo, so they're gonna have to come out and deal with it or send us a replacement. It's the stairs for the slide. And then hopefully, by next summer, we'll have a lease, revised lease or updated lease from Vail, and we'll install the footings and have a nice grand opening, COVID-free.
Wonderful.
Much as I'd like to dissolve that committee, I think we should keep it going. And the reason is, we've got this lease issue with Vail, we've got COVID, we've got the plaque issue. So I don't think we need to meet monthly, but I'd like to keep it on simmer.
Yeah, we'll keep it on the agenda as it is today. Okay, general discussion. Any other questions the board members want to ask for clarification, for information, etc.?
I have a comment I'd like to make. It's based to a previous board meeting item that was in the packet, and it was related to base fees. So we're looking at base fees for the electrical. So I'd like to make a comment, and basically, base fee can be used to mitigate financial exposure due to the high fixed costs that we have here. However, we should not have a base fee so high that it discourages conservation. It is morally wrong and contrary to established jurisprudence where utilities must have measures to encourage conservation, even if greater usage would be financially beneficial. Further, in the example in that board packet, we basically were thinking it was an example where 65% of the average 3-year consumption would be basically a base fee. That concept is flawed in my opinion because
Bertrand.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, no,
Let me one more sentence. I understand. No comments on no opinion, but basically what I want to say is capacity is a much better way to approach this problem, and it's also is consistent with the will serve current process that we have and established principle among utility industry. So what I'd like to ask is people looking at that problem to look at the capacity angle to tackle that issue of base fee.
Okay, great, thank you. Anything else under general discussion?
Eric Rickert, what Bertrand said, I think should be an agenda item for the next finance and committee meeting and board meeting, if that's something you and Eric Christensen agree on, is one of my two comments. The second comment is directed at, I guess, Eric Christensen, Eric Rickert, and the Communications Committee, and that is, I don't want to be what Rick called the newspaper for the community, but I would err on the side of a little more email communication on current events or present issues. I think, if I see a fire at Lake Margaret, I'm not going to go to the district's website to figure it out. So it's just a general sentiment. It's not it's one board member's sentiment, one customer's sentiment, that I err on the side of proactive email communications, not relying on websites. We have community notices, I think, as a one function of the report server. And I also don't want to, get us into a liability situation, but, Vail is notoriously uncommunicative. So that leaves us. That's my sentiment.
Okay, so finance will take on the base fee capacity issue that Bertrand mentioned, and of course communications is taking on the modifications to the policy, and certainly we'll take that your thoughts into consideration. Okay, anything else under general discussion? If not, we're going to go into closed session. The board members will stay on the line, stay with this link, and once everyone else has gone, we'll go into closed session. And then anyone who would like to come back, Eric and I are guessing 45 minutes to an hour to discuss the two topics that we have under closed session. So you're welcome to come back in to the waiting room, and Eric will let you in once we're back in session. Okay, so we will go into closed session. Why don't we take 5 minutes, and everybody return, board members, please return in 5 minutes. We'll start promptly in 5 minutes.
Or don't log off, just stay logged in. This computer. And we're back out of closed session.
Okay, our October board meeting's back in open session. In closed session, we considered two items. No actions were taken on either the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to 54956.9D involving one potential case, nor on the public employee performance evaluation, all employees. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.